first of all, congrats again on season 4. I've seen the first 7 episodes, and F you for not giving me 8, 9, and 10.
You're welcome.
It's all by design.
Yeah, we're still doing, there's visual, as you know, our finales, our last few episodes are always very big. So this season is no exception.
Yeah, I think this is what you did last time, where like the last episode or 2 just wasn't ready for send out.
Yeah.
That's right.
So where are you in post on 8, 9, and 10?
Well, as you know, because the visual effects usually takes the longest, that's the process we're still kind of finalizing and trying to get into shape. But you know, the strike kind of threw off the schedule a bit, and so we're lucky we have time now to really finish it right, and music, sound, stuff like that. But we're hoping to get those out to you guys before the premiere. So that's the hope. Not the season, not episode 1, probably by the end of the year. But yeah, I think you're gonna love it.
Were you actually? That's a legit thing I'm about to ask you. So obviously, when the strike was happening, you could not work on the show. How scared were you about the release of the show with the strike and not being able to tweak things that you might want to tweak?
You know, we were lucky enough that we had sort of finished the editing process basically by the time the strike happened. So a lot of the heavy lifting was done. And so, you know, there was a bit of a concern just in terms of how long visual effects takes to, you know, get that photoreal look that's so important to our show. But we were able to, you know, our visual effects team was able to kind of keep the ball rolling, and we're lucky to be able to premiere it when we are.
So I ask you this question every time we talk. Might as well ask you at this time. When am I getting a starship?
Season 13 or 14, Matt? I don't know. It's somewhere on our timeline, but it's really deep down. I mean, we're getting closer. You have to admit, every season. I mean, it's an interesting thing. You know, I don't know why, but recently I'd watched like a scene from season 1, and it's such a different. The show has evolved so much from then, and I think as you see every season, it kind of becomes more science fiction. So the things that in the beginning of the when we started the show, so much of our research was based on real designs, real plans. Like this happened looking at like the blueprints of the sea dragon. Now we've gotten to the point now where like all our researchers and consultants, they're like arguing with each other over, wait, is this the way it would be? It's all theoretical at this point, a lot of it, I mean, we still try to maintain some tie to science, but the science we're dealing with now is science that's, some of it's kind of is being explored right now in our current time, and some of it has not even been explored yet. So I think the show, as it continues going on, it sort of becomes more, theoretical. And I think that challenge is interesting. Because, for Matt and I think it's really important to maintain a very grounded show, that the show feels grounded. And the further we go into the future, the harder that is to accomplish.
Listen, I think that there's this place called NASA and other space places that I am confident are all watching your show. Now, and that's what I wanted to ask you. Have you gotten messages from like Blue Origin, like Jeff Bezos and like Elon and NASA and people that are clearly interested in the space race and outer space, emailing and saying blah, 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 or you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, we definitely hear, especially through Garrett Reisman, our one of our technical advisors, former astronaut, a lot of he's obviously was with NASA for a long time and then was sort of the head of the SpaceX space division for the manned spaceflight part of SpaceX's program for a long time and is still connected with that. So we hear through a lot of secondhand through him, like the Kelly brothers are really into the show and stuff like that. I haven't heard anything from Bezos or Musk personally. They haven't emailed me yet, but I'm waiting. My email inbox is waiting for their messages.
Got it. Getting back to the Starship. So I don't want to do spoilers, but in season 4, going to Mars is sort of now like just flying to Boston from LA. Like the drama has been solved, if you will. So talk a little bit about that. Like now in season 4, how long does it take from, I forget because I think you said it. is it like 30 days from Earth to Mars?
Right. Yeah, 30 days. And the moon, which used to take 3 days to get to, is now like is you can get there in less than a day. And I think that was something that was really important for us in the way that flight on the planet Earth evolved from something that was very risky to something that was very commonplace and safe. We felt like space flight would take that same trajectory and become much more commonplace and safe. And there aren't all these, obviously our show is filled with a lot of space accidents for dramatic purposes. But in season 4, it's really become commonplace. And there are monthly trips to Mars because the amount of workers on the planet has grown so much. And that obviously necessitated having different types of engines with the ships, plasma and ion engines, which have never been tested in space really, but are theoretically possible and have been, prototypes have been developed here on Earth. And that constant acceleration will just shrink the timeline. So now in season 3, you had to wait 2 years when Mars and Earth were sort of in the optimal position to have the shortest transit time. Now you can launch wherever, you just every month there's another transport ship to Mars coming back and forth.
Although I will say, just to put my nerd hat on, like it's 30 days is the best case scenario. Obviously it changes depending on when you launch, how close Earth is to Mars. So I'm not going to get into it now, but yeah, 30 days is sort of the closest window you can do.
One of the things is talk a little bit about how much do you want the show to deal with the ramifications of someone being in space for years, because I'm not a scientist, but I have read or heard that if you're like in outer space for years, even with gravity, it's still going to do a number to your body.
Yeah, no, it is something that the show has sort of had to tackle more and more now that we have people up there for so much longer. I think Ed Baldwin is probably the character that most exemplifies that impact. It's something that we researched a lot about as well in terms of like what are the impacts of living on that planet for that long. And I think the biggest thing is radiation, right? That's the biggest risk. Like the more radiation exposure you have, obviously the more dangerous over time. So it became interesting that the older you are, though, the less of a risk, really, in a way, not less of a risk of radiation, but less of a risk of lifespan to have to deal with that. So I think it's something where, I don't want to spoil anything, but in the construction of the base, it's something we also took into question. Like, okay, well, how do you limit radiation? Like if there is, how do you limit the exposure as much as possible is a big thing. And then physically, in terms of movement, it's also something that as you get older, it may be in certain ways easier to be on Mars than on Earth because the pressure of gravity is less. So for someone like Ed Baldwin, who's older, I think if he was on Earth, it would be a lot harder on him to walk around than it is on Mars. So I think that there's the pros and cons of living, I think, in that kind of environment.
Yeah, I could go real geeky and say, are they building with like UV bounce in the ceiling, all that stuff. But what do you guys actually want to tease fans about season 4 that is not in the trailer or in the trailer?
I think what was most exciting to us to delve into in season 4 in a way that we had not yet in the previous seasons is this idea of who gets to go to space. Because in the first 3 seasons and in our real timeline, really, almost everyone that has gone to space has been a pilot or a scientist, an engineer, people that have trained their whole lives for that purpose. And we felt like in the evolution of our show and sort of the idea of mining for resources on planets like you and these large scale building projects, you wouldn't just be bringing pilots and scientists and engineers. You'd be bringing construction workers and miners and people that have a different skill set, that space is not necessarily their natural habitat, if you will. And so that was really interesting to bring in characters in Miles Dale and Samantha and some other people that you meet as the season goes on, who are sort of normal people who are just looking to make a living, support their families, advance their careers. But it's more of a sort of a blue collar element, whereas there's the sort of rarefied air of the astronauts and cosmonauts, and that dynamic, how those people interact together, we find really interesting.
When you guys talked about every season, you've talked about how you had a roadmap that you came up with a while ago that you were sort of walking down. So how far had you thought about the roadmap? And are we starting to get to a place where the roadmap is no longer written?
We had a very ambitious roadmap, I would say. Early on, we planned this out over 6 or 7 seasons. So we're still on the roadmap. And, I'm proud to say that we've stuck to, I think, the big goalposts we've had so far. Obviously, there are changes every season, and we leave, the writers and the writers' room flexibility to go off the map if we have to or make changes. But right now, we're interested. We're sort of like past the halfway point in a way, and it's fascinating that I think, as in most TV shows in the beginning, you dream of like, oh, I see this big arc. As ambitious as we were, I don't think at that moment we really felt we were like, oh yeah, for sure. Let's talk about what's going to happen in season 6 of the show. But here we are, premiering season 4. And it's incredible to see the kind of the opportunity we've had, not only to show how, the show is advanced and technology is advanced on the show, but how these characters have evolved, that now you're seeing their children and even their children's children. So it's sort of that opportunity makes the show really unique. And I think the hope is to be able to take that story all the way to the present time. I think that was always, for me, a goal of how amazing it would be to get to the present of our alt history and kind of see how different the world could have been. I think that's something we're really looking forward to.
See, my thing is, and this is me spitballing, and pardon me as I say this, but so my question is it possible that For All Mankind goes 6-7 seasons with your original plan, and then there is a spin-off show that goes like 200 years later where it all of a sudden becomes a version of Star Trek, and you're like, you glossed over how you got to the warp engine, if you will, but somehow in those 200 years you did. And all of a sudden Ron Moore is now, oh yeah.
Apple, are you listening?
Steve's got a pitch.
Look, that's what's cool about this universe is that it's kind of like there are so many different possibilities, so many ways you could go, so many different stories you can tell within this universe of For All Mankind, that we really, from that butterfly moment of the Soviets beating us to the moon, the way we view it is it's a whole new universe that keeps getting more and more different. And so, it's really blue skies, I think, in terms of the potential for the storytelling going forward.
Yeah, I only say this because I know the way contracts work. And, after 7 seasons, if you want to go to another, like, it's a whole mess of a thing. So that's why I was saying For All Mankind is like the prequel show to the, right, whatever the Star Trek show is.
Right. I love it. I think right now we're just focusing on let's getting season 5 launched.
No, I'm messing with you, but I'm just thinking about this.
Yeah, I think we're ambitious. We definitely are hungry to tell more of this story. And we think, like Matt said, there's an opportunity with this show that we built a unique world. And I think the key to that, to however far we go, is how do you keep it grounded? I think that was what was always so fascinating to us about this concept was, yes, it's sci-fi, but we wanted to feel very grounded sci-fi. We did, and I think the struggle of jumping that much in time is how do you still maintain the tone and the feel For All Mankind if you were to do something like that, And I think that's something we're facing right now, even with season 4. A lot of it comes back to how would it truly feel to build a colony on Mars? What would be the actual issues you'd have to deal with? The moral dilemmas. That's what goes into our thinking with the show. And I think something we really try to hold on to, even if we're getting further and further into the alt history.
So I always look at the Apple top 10 to see like what's in there. And For All Mankind is in there a lot. It's mostly always in the top 10. So has Apple told you We're really happy. And again, I think I've asked this, does Tim Cook watch the show or any executives? Because that will help keep it on the air.
We've heard nothing but really positive things from Apple and how the show's doing for them. And I think they're really happy. And, both with how it's doing in terms of viewers and how it's doing creatively. And I don't know necessarily which people are watching it or not, or which ones it's on the top of their list. But it's, everybody seems really happy with it.
We've heard we have fans in Cupertino. That's as far as
that's true.
Well, I'm going to say, and I've said this many times, I think Apple, and I'll say it straight up, they are making the best sci-fi that's on television right now. Yeah. Between your show and Silo and, Monarch, which is coming out soon, like everything they're doing sci-fi related is fantastic.
Yeah, I agree. Honestly, I think that the quality level of Apple overall is really strong. Like you just can tell that there's a level of thought behind their shows that it really we've felt in working with them that there's a high expectation level for what they put on the air.
What shot or sequence in the 4 seasons was the backbreaker, where you wrote it but didn't realize what it was actually going to entail?
Oof.
Man, that's a good question. There are so many.
I feel like we deal with that every season. I will say, even in this first episode of season 4, there's a sequence in the middle that was very challenging. I think when you watch it, you will know what sequence I'm talking about. But it's seeing our stunt team is unbelievable. We in the room come up with these insane ideas every season, and I think because we see they can pull it off, we go crazier and crazier every season. I feel like in terms of what we want to accomplish. And I think a big thing for us is not to repeat ourselves. So a lot of the action sequences this year are very challenging. They were very challenging. I think they challenged our crew more than any other season before, but we really pulled it off. I think and I think the actors being able to put themselves in the harnesses and put themselves through that in these huge bulky suits is not easy. But I think for me, that scene in the middle of episode 4 was incredibly challenging, and something we worked on. The visual effects there are something we worked on for a while too to really get that right. So the key is, with everything like that, you never want to think beyond the scene and the action and the drama of the moment. But what goes behind that is so much stunt work, so much visual effects, so much acting that you really need to pull something complicated like that off. And that's just one episode, you could look at this first episode and go, it's a huge action movie. And then we've got 9 more to go. So I think for us, it was great. On one hand, in the writer's room, when we had this concept, it was like, oh my God, this is going to be amazing. But then pulling it off was a real challenge.
I'm curious if I can ask about the writing, because you obviously, how much are you in your mind saying, okay, well, look, every season, first episode, we got to make sure we have some action thing in it to hook people back in. And then the finale, we have to have some sort of big action thing to sort of, how much is that in your writing process? Because you also only have so much money to spend that you can only do sequences like that at certain points in the season. So how much is it? The first episode and the last episode are going to get money, and then we're going to do one other one, maybe episode 5 or whatever it might be. Or does that not enter the brain?
It does to a certain degree. I think we always think about how can we sort of grab people at the beginning. It doesn't have to necessarily be a big action set piece per se. But we really want to kind of plant our flag on what type of season this is going to be, and really have something emotional happen and something dramatic that tees up the season in a big way. And then, the way we tell stories tends to build to a climax. But on the flip side of that, we are always constantly aware of the audience's expectation. And so if our show is falling into a expectation of, well, we know in the first and the last episode, it's going to be big action set piece, and then everything in the middle is nothing. It's just, character work and drama. we want to try to find ways to undermine that or take you in a way you're not going to expect to go. So it's always a balance between those things, but we're definitely thinking about it all the time.
So I'm looking at some of my questions. So how big is the writer's room on this series, and how much has it changed? How many people have been there besides you two since the beginning who are still writing on it?
I mean, we've been fortunate to have some people with us from the beginning, but as the show has evolved, so has the writer's room. I think we've brought in new people as the show has gone on. But I think it's sort of an interesting metaphor for the show itself, right? Like as the show grows, we wanted to bring in new voices, and those voices have helped tell these new stories as we've gone on. So even just like our cast and crew, there are people that have been with us since the beginning, us old timers, and then there are people who are kind of coming in to freshen things up. But the room, I think right now we're at about, I want to say about 8 writers, right? And yeah, it was interesting. We kind of have to do the Zoom room thing last season, which is also not the most fun thing in the world, because you lose those little moments. But I think because we have such a good relationship with the writers and we know each other so well, because we've done this for so long, there's a shorthand where I think the Zoom isn't as impact as it would be on another show. We kind of know the show, we know the tone, and we know each other. So I think it's honestly a lot of fun to kind of get back in the room with everyone and work things out.
What is it like on the first day? So for example, season 4, it's the first day of the writer's room. I guess you're doing a Zoom thing. What is it actually like that day? How much does the staff know about your overall vision of the show, the 6-7 season plan? Like, what is it like that first day?
They definitely know the vision. They've all seen when we used to meet in person, we had around the room, there was like a timeline laying out a lot of the events. And it even, it was a huge writer's room in terms of space, and it went all the way around just because we mapped it out so long. Now it's just on a screen. But what a lot of times will happen is Ben and I will take sort of the morning to lay out a lot of the things we've already thought about prior to the room, and lay out some story arcs that we're thinking of and some new characters we want to try to bring in. And it's a lot of talk about themes we want to touch on, and kind of how we see the world of the show evolving. If we've had any thoughts about major life events that may have happened in characters' lives between seasons. But it's always kind of a jumping off point. Nothing is set in stone, because we really feel it's important to have the first few weeks of the room be like a blue skies, anything is possible, best idea wins, kind of free for all of just a fun discussion. There's a lot of storylines we go down for a couple of days that wind up not coming to fruition at all. But that's not really wasted time, because you're getting to know these characters again, and you're kind of getting to wrap your mind around where they are at in their lives. And because we think so much in depth about the characters' lives and the world, I think that trickles down into the episodes later, a lot of that work we do early on.
How many of the scripts do you normally have done before you start filming?
Oh, man. In the beginning, we always plan to have all of them done before we start. And that never happens.
Yeah. I mean, I think, the goal is always to have as many as possible, so you're not writing while you're shooting. That goal on every TV show we've ever worked on, I think that's always the goal. And I don't think it ever happens that you have every script before you start shooting. So usually it ends up being, in some version, Matt or I on set in the back corner of the dark room with a laptop hunched up working on a script towards the end of the season. It happens every season. And when we start a new season, we're like, how do we avoid that? What can we do to avoid being in that situation? And literally the same thing happens every year. So I don't know if it's a TV thing where, you kind of wait till you use the time you have. Maybe that's kind of what it is as a writer, but it's something we try to improve on every year.
So season 4, you gave it away in the poster, is about mining an asteroid. So who came up with was this in the original like idea, the 6-7 year plan that we'd eventually get to an asteroid and we'd mine it?
Definitely. We have always been interested in the idea, not only of mining asteroids, but the idea of harnessing and moving asteroids, which is such a kind of a mind-blowing concept that there's actually been a lot of thought and theories bandied about how you might do that. And so from season 1, we knew that we wanted to kind of head in that direction, because mainly we've always wanted to ground space travel. And it's not just about exploration, because exploration only gets you so far. A lot of the roots behind exploration are for resources. You're exploring things to find resources. And the asteroid belt is the sort of the gold mine of the solar system. Like there is so much valuable stuff in our hills over there. And so we've been intrigued by this idea of, as the space program, space exploration expands, and it becomes more about like, wow, these resources that are just so rare on Earth but are abundant in space, how would that impact how people behave and how countries behave to each other? And what's the new race for those? That becomes what the space race is the race for resources and for riches. So we talked a lot in the room about like the Treasure of the Sierra Madre and a lot of Westerns, where this idea of how greed and sort of competition for wealth can impact human beings.
Season 4 opens with another montage, which I know you guys both love and dread putting together. So what do you want to tease people about that montage? Are there any like shots that go by really fast that you should keep an eye out on?
Oh, we have those. I think it's interesting, this year's montage, because I was noticing how much of the montage is now alt history. I think in the past we used the montage as a way, like we do with the music, to kind of settle you in the era, in that year. Whereas this year I felt so much of it was alt history. And it really showed how much the butterfly effect had impacted our world. So the moments of actual history are few and far between, and maybe moments that we felt would stand out in ways that we think would be funny and entertaining. But it's interesting that even as a montage piece, it doesn't only set the table. There are story points in there that set up the season. So I think when you talk about those little moments, I do think it's the kind of thing you want to watch in real time, and then later, if you have the time and the wherewithal, it would be worth your while to look through slowly, because there are little Easter eggs throughout. And yeah, like you said, it's all. I always feel when we make this thing, it's a mini documentary we're doing on the side of For All Mankind, and we're literally doing it as we're shooting the show and writing the show. Like there's this thing continuing on, and the legal process, and it's such a collaborative and complex process. But in the end, we're really happy with this one. I think this year's is probably the best one so far.
What ends up being the most challenging part of making the show that fans might not expect?
I would say for me personally, it's the news reports, because so much thought has to go into the writing of the news reports, but also building out the world in a way that, a lot of those bonus reports that are done, the sort of the yearly news reports that are aired before the season, so much thought goes into the alternate history of that and then the writing of that Ben and I joke all the time about how our dream is to write like a cop procedural where you don't have to think about, like what happened in Germany in 1998, and like just all these things that we have to put our brain power into. That's fun, but it's also very challenging. And as a writer, it's very there's a special cadence to writing for a news anchor that it's very easy to not feel real, and so it's that's something that I think is challenging in a way that maybe is not as glamorous as some of the other stuff that's challenging.
What do you want to tease people about Toby Kebbell's role on season 4 and his character's journey?
This was the big new character this season. And I think for us, like Matt said earlier, a lot of it was, how do we capture the idea of the everyman, someone who is struggling on Earth to make a living, where their opportunity now in Mars and our alt history to help support his family. So I feel like Toby, when we casted him, we knew, I mean, we have been a fan of his for years from his previous work. He has this ability to really like just become the character in a way that is uncanny. And he really took on this role in a way that embraced not only the struggles of the guy in the beginning, but then seeing his wonder in going up to this new world. So to me, it always felt the possibility of having that perspective, a different perspective for the first time on this show, of someone going to Mars, not to do research, not to explore, but to make a living. And I think that's the thing that I think I'm most excited about this season, really, is both Toby, but you have all these other characters who are up there to make a living for their families back home, which really tells you, one, about how much space travel has changed, how much it's become normalized in a way. And I think really a dividing point of this show right now, of where we're headed, is more in a world where, because space travel is more normalized, not only the kinds of people that go to, but what they're doing when they go up there, and I think being away from his family, but also having to learn the rules of the game up there, is one of the central arcs of the season. And look, I think the other nature of the show is that we bring in new faces every season, right? We have some of our old cast remain, and just like we brought in Deva Yesa with Edi Gathegi last season, I think Toby came in to play this role. I think for the show to continue, the idea is that we'll be bringing in these new faces every season while keeping some of our previous characters from previous seasons. So it's not such a huge change from season to season. You're seeing kind of the slower baton pass of the show happen.
Well, one of the things about the show is you don't introduce people that like quickly he's a real actor, really talented actor. So my question is, when you're casting someone like this, and I don't want to say anything about his journey through the 7 episodes I've seen, but you are introducing new things to For All Mankind involving his character. And it could be an arc that goes for a long time because of what things. I can't say it. So my question is, well, is it safe to assume that Toby is not a one-season character, and this is a bigger thing that you're introducing to outer space?
Spoiler alert.
Yeah. I would say that we definitely approached that character with the point of view of wanting them to be a multi-season character, and Miles to kind of be a new presence that grows with the Mars colony. And I think when we were casting, one of the things we were really looking for was versatility and breadth of experience as an actor, that they've played different types of roles, because people evolve and change. And I think what's great about Toby is that he's played, like, if you look at his character in that Black Mirror episode, which is fantastic, versus Rock and Rolla, or some of the other things, like, he's played so many different types of characters, or in Servant, that we knew he had that breadth of ability to tell the kind of the longer arc of Miles Dale as a character.
Yeah, I don't want to get into specifics, but it's cool because it's a completely different side of For All Mankind that is being introduced to the series. So with Edward Baldwin, how old is he in season 4?
How old do you think he is in season 4? No, I think right now he's in his early 70s. I don't like to say a specific number because then people jump all over the number, but I have to give Joel Kinnaman credit this season that he embraced fully the aging process in a way that Matt and I really appreciated. Like, he not only sitting in a makeup chair for 4 or 5 hours a day, putting on prosthetics. So he'd be there like 2-3 in the morning on a work day, putting on the prosthetics. But then, the way he moved, I think the things people don't appreciate as much, and maybe they're starting to, is the way he moves, the voice, the little things. He lost 30 pounds of muscle this season of what, for this role. So you talk about an actor who commits to the part. There's no one like him, in my view, in terms of really being able to take on the aging and embracing it. I think Wrenn Schmidt is another one. She fully takes it on. She understands that she understood from early on, if we're going to tell the story of someone's lifetime, then you have to show that process of aging happening. So I think, sometimes we get lost a little bit in what is their age and what is the number and what, how old are they? For us, more than anything, it's about change, right? It's about evolution. The idea of, if you look at Joel or Ed Baldwin in season 1 and Ed Baldwin season 4, you understand how much that guy has changed and aged. And I think the real tell is when you meet our actors in real life, which happens a lot, people are always thrown by how young they look. I think that's a testament to our makeup team that, they do the kind of makeup that sometimes is subtle. Sometimes it's like where we put a wrinkle. I can't even tell you how much time we put into like, where is that wrinkle and where do we put the aging spots and what are the age spots and it's a whole other side of For All Mankind that's happening all the time and really is quite challenging. And the actors, we're thankful that we have the actors that embrace it. They embrace it fully.
Is this, obviously, if he's in his 70s, he still has possible time, but are we nearing the end of the Edward Baldwin arc of For All Mankind, or is he someone who could survive into being 100 or 110?
We can't answer that. Come on, Steve. There's no way we're answering that.
Never know what space to do. It's untested waters. Who knows what impacts on longevity space might have?
Sure, I won't pressure. They've got to go for some curveballs. So showrunners tell me that when every season of a show, they get to build a new set, or they get to build a little bit of some new stuff because that you get to. So what did you get to build in season 4 that you can tease people?
Well, the irony of our show is that it's almost like a new show every year. We have I think more than any other show, probably a reset of the sets, because we're always evolving and going to new places. So the really exciting thing this season is to see how those few small rooms that were the Mars base of Happy Valley in season 3 that we left those people stranded in on Mars, how that's become a really thriving Mars base with hundreds of people living and working there. That process of building those sets and figuring out, well, how would all these people live together? Would it all be on the surface? Would there be something that isn't on the surface? What rooms would the Russians have built versus Americans have built versus SpaceX? Versus Helios having built. Whoops, Freudian slip. So, that was really fun to see, like, well, what would the aesthetic differences be? There's a particular module in the Mars base that's sort of the Soviet contribution to the expansion of the base. That's kind of their OPSCOM room that, it was fun to explore, well, how would Soviet architecture and design have changed the look of what is essentially a technical space?
Is there anything that you've wanted to do on the show that you've not been able to because of just budgetary reasons? Like you had an idea or an arc, you're like, this would be amazing, and we definitely don't have the money.
No. I have to say, I think this is probably why we've aged so much through this process of the show. It's a very challenging show, but I think the big ideas we have been able to accomplish, and I think part of that, even this season, I think there's always little story arcs or little things we wanted to do that we can't do, right? But sometimes those limitations or budgetary limitations end up with the most creative solutions in terms of storytelling. So I think our philosophy is we go into the room, anything goes. Let's go big, and then we'll figure out how to do it. And I think it's a testament to our crew and our line producer that we're able to accomplish those things. I think the big thing this season that was very new for us was shooting in Eastern Europe. We wanted to capture Margot's experience in Russia. And we felt that you cannot do that in Los Angeles. So for us, it was a very big change for the show to, at the end of the season, go find a location in Eastern Europe that could fill in for, alt history Soviet Union of the era, and do it. It's almost, we brought in some of our crew, some of our cast, but most of it is all new people who've never worked on the show before. It was quite a change for us. It was quite a challenge. But I think that answers your question about, we felt we had to figure out a way to make that happen. There were challenges in doing it. But now looking at season 4, I'm so thrilled that we were able to go there and pull that off, because it really does feel like a new world on the show going there.
Well, especially, and again, no spoilers, but you're in buildings that clearly are not in Los Angeles. And I was actually wondering about that. So how long did you actually get to film in Eastern Europe? Like, how long was that location filming?
It was, I think, almost a month of shooting, a little shorter than a month. In February, obviously, there's snow everywhere. It looks freezing because it was freezing. But you're right. Like, it was very important to us to shoot on location in these places that you just cannot replicate. And not only the buildings, but the actors. Like, you just have access to a whole different type of actor that looks and feels of that place and time. And it really brings, again, this sense of grounded realism to those moments that is really important to the show.
Absolutely. And as I was watching it, I'm like, wait, what? Because it was clearly not LA. Question, at some point this series is going to end. I'll be upset, but I want to know, have you asked Apple and been like, hey, if this is the last season, can you tell us so we can do an ending that where we want to end it? Have you had that conversation with them? Because, it would be weird to end on a cliffhanger of season 4 and then, not have any sort of resolution.
I agree. I don't. It's something that I don't love in shows I watch. We haven't had that conversation because, to be honest, Apple's been very supportive of the show and very supportive of the original pitch we had of going that distance. So we've been fortunate that the show has been received well by fans of, people who watch Apple, people who don't watch Apple. It's clearly that more and more people have caught on to the show over the seasons. So I think as long as people watch it, we'll be able to continue and finish the story we want to tell. And all we've heard from Apple is, positive support and reinforcing the idea that they also want us to finish this arc. So I don't want to think negative thoughts of not being able to do that, but that's really for us, always been the goal. Let us get to the end of this. Let's tell the story as we intended.
Do you guys actually have the end of the arc that you're trying to say already figured out, like the last shot or the last thing? Or do you sort of just have an idea of where you're going?
We have some ideas of shots and moments that, whether they wind up being the last shot or moment, remains to be seen, because you never know what's going to change. But we've definitely thought through to a fairly specific degree how to bring it to a close.
So obviously the writer's strike happened. Everyone knows, and the actors are still on strike. But before the strike happened on July 1st, how much had you guys been working on the writing of season 5?
You're so clever in how you do that. I got to give you credit. You slide it in.
I've been listening. I don't know if you know this. I've been doing Collider for 18 years, and I've done an awful lot of interviews. And hey,
we have not officially gotten a season 5 pickup.
Oh,
we do want Apple to talk to our agent manager Steve Weintraub so that we can get that process started as soon as possible.
Sir, I am well aware that they have not announced a season 5, but I'm also aware that all the streamers they have writers' rooms that go usually as soon as the previous season ends, just in case they want to do the next season. It expedites the process. It's how you guys have been able to put a show on basically every year.
Well, and it's interesting because I think the difference this year, because of the writer's strike, we weren't able to do that. So we weren't able to start a room for season 5. So, which, I think you're right. That's usually how it works on a show like ours, where you would have to start the room before the next season premieres. I think this is the first time in the history of the show where the show is premiering without us really starting a room for season 5. So not only do we not have an official pickup, we haven't even started the room yet. And, in a way, I think that's because of the strike. I think we had to hold off, and I think it was the right move. And hopefully we can get that pickup and continue to tell the story.
Well, one of the things that I think one of the problems with streaming is that often you have a very big gap between seasons, and it really, really destroys the momentum of a show. Because I'm not sure about you guys, but when it's been 2.5 years since I saw the last season, I don't care as much. Yeah. Like, I'm just not as invested. And one of the secrets of For All Mankind is it's been almost every year that there's a season. So you just keep on, you're so invested. So I guess my question is, if Apple calls you and says, hey, we want to do season 5, how long does a writer's room typically take? Like, if you guys if they called you and said, let's set this up, is it like 4 or 5 months of writing before you can be filming? Is it longer? Like, what is that kind of time frame look?
Yeah, it's about that, but actually the real hurdle to our show in particular and shows like it is the visual effects process. The visual effects take so long to do, and the reason they look so good is because they take so long to make.
Do it right, yeah.
To do it right. Yeah. So, like, our line producer, Seth Edelstein, I don't remember which season this was. He went, after we finished shooting our show, he went to work on, he produced Hacks, and that show aired before our show, but they shot it after our show because they don't have all the visual effects to do. So it's kind of baked into the show on a certain level. I agree with you that the amount of time between a show's seasons airing can impact how much people are engaged. And know that Ben and I are doing everything we can to make that as small as possible within the limitations of what it takes to make our show, because we also want it to be as good as every other season has been in terms of the level of the visual effects and the storytelling and how it's shot.
I totally understand. I think that in this particular instance with the strikes, every show, every single thing from movies to television is going to be impacted by 6 months. Yeah. So no one has a cheat code to get past this. My feeling is like, okay, it's the end of October as we talk. God willing, the SAG strike ends and you can be, God willing, filming in April. This is just a guesstimate, but there's no way the show's on. And if you happen to get a season 5 pickup, please, Apple. There's no way it'll be on until 2025. There's physically no way. Yeah.
I think, look, the thing that happened with the strike was necessary. It had to happen, and there are consequences to those things. So I think you're right. It affected almost every show, and I think audiences now are a little more forgiving. I think people are a little more engaged now. They know what happened with the writer's strike and the SAG strike. I think there's an understanding now that there will be delays on certain shows not coming back as quickly as they did, that it won't be the same. So I think in this next year, I think people understand why there are those delays. But to me, the key is, especially with our show, it's, you can always go back and watch the last season and catch up, right? Rewatch season 3. That's the thing, our show is almost like an anthology in that way, where you can see the show, the past seasons again before the next season shows up. And there's a lot of TV out there right now. So I think that opportunity is there where that you can, I hope that our delay isn't as big as some of these other shows. We actually pride ourselves on having as small a window between seasons as possible. But some of these delays on other shows that are really huge are getting longer and longer, So I agree with you. It's a problem, but it's kind of a first world problem.
Totally. But it also comes down to which networks and shows are allowing a writer's room to continue the second after you wrap, and which ones are like, we'll figure it out later. Right. Because when you have those writer's rooms going, it really expedites the process. But I'm looking at the clock and I'm realizing something. So good news for fans, assuming you get season 5, this show will be airing into 2024, season 4. Right. And in actuality, season 5, if you get the green light, will absolutely air in 2025 because so it's really only it will be the next year. It'll just be a long distance between the beginning of 2024 and the ending of 2025.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, I'm just doing the math in my head, and I'm like, I'm just trying to put it together. So I know you guys are 24/7 on this show. Is it one of these situations where you are still so much enjoying it, or are you also at the same time like trying to write other things while this is going on to produce? You know what I mean? Or like because how does that work for you guys?
No, it's you're right. It is a 24/7 job, and honestly, more than 24/7 on this show. But I think for Ben and I, like, we can't help but think about other things, and it's almost like a weird kind of fun respite from the show to explore other ideas. There's nothing that's necessarily like in the works right now, but we're always thinking about what's over the next horizon and what things intrigue us and get us creatively inspired. So, this show is so specific in its science focus, but it's also in its history focus and all that stuff. So, I think we're, having started in comedy, we're always people who look at different genres, different types of storytelling in ways that we find really compelling. So I think in addition to For All Mankind, we're excited to find those next things that will allow us to do different types of shows.
Yeah, I'm curious if you're thinking about movies as something in the future, or do you like the genre of television where you can really spend so much time with characters? Because you movies are very tough. It's spectacle versus sometimes substance.
Yeah. No, I think, I don't think we'd say no to movies, but I agree with you. I think most of our focus is on television, and it's something that we've worked on now for, almost 20 years. Like, I think being able to tell the story over years with characters, and in this show over people's lifetimes, is a unique opportunity we don't take for granted. I think that's the thing with writers, that we're, a lot of times being a writing team also, we have the ability you have to have the ability to focus on more than one thing at a time, so I think sometimes, yes, while this show is all encompassing, I think it's important in our career and in any writer's career to be thinking ahead. It's even the writers in our show. We encourage them to be working on their own pilots while they're staffing on our show, because we know that for a writer to succeed, to keep growing as a writer, you need to keep working on your own thing. So the idea that, like, if you're not focused on only the thing you're working on, then you're not able to do it, I think is wrongheaded. And I don't think it's a smart move for any writer.
So usually it's about 10 years in between every season. Should I assume if you do 5 and season 6 or even 7, is it always going to be like a 10-year thing? Or do you have the idea to make a bigger jump in the future?
I think, definitely, like Ben said at one point, the idea of getting up to the present in our show is something that's so compelling to us, where a season is set in the year it airs, so that when the viewer is looking around at the world that they're in and then the world that could have been on the screen, it really like nails the kind of the promise of the premise of our show in a real big way. But as I was saying earlier, also, expectation is kind of the the enemy of good storytelling on a certain level. And so I don't think we would rule out something like that at some point in the show either.
So have you figured out what the starship will look like?
Well, it's probably going to be a disc that's sort of, turned flat, and
it sort of looks like this office I'm in right now. Very light.
Listen, when you have Ron Moore as someone who works, one of the main people, or producer, I'm not exactly sure what Ron does on a day-to-day basis. I think he's an executive producer, whatever. But I mean, when he's involved, you can't help but talk Star Trek / starships.
Well, it's interesting, Ron is always involved in the show, but he obviously co-created this with us. And I think as much as he's part of that world and was in Star Trek and Battlestar. He's also, like us, very intrigued in other genres. He also did Outlander, and he develops other things. So I think it's a testament to him as a writer, but also, to kind of what we did with this show is the idea of, now more than ever, television doesn't have to be just so genre specific. I mean, you're seeing TV shows now that have comedy, even though they're dramas, or are sci-fi, but, period. Like, so I think the good thing about where television is, and I hope continues to be, is the ability to tell stories that aren't just specific to one genre or one type. And I think that's something that, Ron, Matt, and I early on saw with this show, that it was hard to define. And I think that's a good thing, not necessarily a bad thing.
Last question for you guys, and you've been very generous with your time. Is there any technology or advances that you've seen in the real world that you're like, oh yes, we need to use that?
That's a stumper. I think, I don't know if there's a specific thing, although there's lots of things as each season, in the way we brought in nuclear fusion or these different types of engines. But what we're always, more than the technology, I think what we're super interested in is how technology changes society and how people behave differently based on technology and how it can shift things. And I think AI obviously is the touchword now in technology of how that is about to shift our world in big ways that everybody's intrigued by and scared by. And, in the For All Mankind world, I don't know, we haven't figured out yet how something like that fits in. But what it's really what it's got us thinking about is how does really big fundamental technologies like that shift the world in a big way. That is kind of one of the secret weapons of our show, is exploring ideas like that.
And I'll add to that, like, I think what's interesting too, this is the first time in many ways, like the Asteroid missions happening right now with Matt, the Psyche mission literally launched the day our trailer dropped. So there's an interplay there that's interesting of, here we are doing a season focused on mining asteroids, as I think this interest in asteroids is happening literally as we speak, is booming. So I think the timing of that is great. It's fortuitous for our show, but also it speaks to what Matt was saying, this idea of, the science. We're getting photos from Mars as we're doing VFX on the show and looking at how to color the landscape. We're actually getting photos from Mars every day and discussing them with Jay Red, our VFX supervisor, going like, oh, what about this? What about this color? Look, this is how a sunset looks on Mars. So that ability to take actual science that's happening in real time and have it impact the show is really special. And it's something we don't take for granted. And I think it's something we're going to continue to do, so this resurgence of interest in space travel happening as the show keeps growing has really been fortuitous, I think, for us.
Yeah, I just want to point out for people that haven't looked there, you can go online and watch actual video from Mars with the actual audio from the rover that NASA or whoever put up there. And it's insane that this is something you can just do on your computer. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, just go to Mars and just watch video and listen to the planet. It's insane that this is just a normal thing.
Yeah.
So agree.
It's anyway, I'm floored by it, which is why I know all those people at NASA are watching For All Mankind. There's no doubt in my mind. Anyway, listen, gentlemen, I really want to say congrats on the series. You know how much I love it. And I really do hope you get to tell the full arc of what you want to do. And I look forward to talking spoilers with you later on, because I avoided everything during this conversation.
You did a great job. Thank you. And we can't wait to keep the conversation going. We love everything you do. And this was a fun conversation.